Hello, listeners. Welcome back to the latest Arcade Attack podcast. I've got another true retro gamer legend on the show today, a real pioneer. He's seen it all. It's Eugene Jarvis. How you doing, Eugene?
Hey, I'm doing good, man. I still have some eyesight left, you know.
Good on you. It's look, I know we've had you on our site before as a text interview, but actually getting you on the proper show, it's a real honor. And you've had a magnificent career, so I can't wait to sort of pick your brains. And we'll start from the beginning, if that's all right. And again, I'm kind of looking around on your sort of wiki page, and it might not be completely correct, so you could always just, correct me and stuff. But I've got it here that you started work at HP, Hewlett Packard, for only 3 days, and then you chose to leave. Is that true? Is there any truth in that?
Yeah, so I don't know, when you're young, you do some pretty stupid things, And so I was interviewing I graduated from college, and I was interviewing, and I remember I interviewed at Atari, and I was really excited about that, opportunity, like working with games, and then they never called me back, and I guess like an idiot, I never thought of calling them, so I just thought, oh well, enough of that. And ended up going to work at HP. I was kind of excited about computer compilers, language compilers, and language translators. I kind of wanted to create a computer to pass the Turing test, And so I thought, I could learn a lot of stuff. And then the job was working with, computer language compilers. I guess the particular language was, one of the more heinous languages ever created, called COBOL. Which is some government programming language. And, after about 2 or 3 days of that, and it's funny, at lunchtime, we'd have lunch with the other engineers. Everybody kind of brought their bag lunch in those days, and you'd kind of sit down at the lunch table, and they'd be all talking about how they were programming their lawn sprinklers and shit,
Right.
and that was the state of the art for them, and I was just man, this is going to be a long, actually it was going to be a 6-year project. This is going to be one long fucking 6 years. and so I quit. I couldn't take it. And just by blind luck, Atari called me a couple days later, and they finally were getting back to me from 6 months before. And right. so then I went to work at Atari.
Well, I didn't realize you had an interview before Hewlett Packard then. Was that,
yeah.
So that was 6 months before, a whole half a year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was chaotic. Atari was a very chaotic, crazy place. It was a bunch of hippies trying to run a console, and then they were getting into the pinball business, and obviously they had the arcade video going, and they were getting into everything. I remember they even had a project to do video telephones, if you can believe it, video chat.
Oh, wow.
Back in that was the 76, and so it was a very interesting place, very fast moving, and people were coming and going, and I remember I was in the programming department. I was doing for pinball games. They were getting into electronic pinballs, and my boss quit, and his boss quit, and after a couple of weeks, I was the department head, So it was pretty ridiculous.
Wow. Who interviewed you? Was it Nolan Bushnell, or was anyone else? Or do you remember?
I think it was a really hot chick. That kind of that sealed the whole thing for me. And but Nolan would come down. We'd see him. And he'd be, just, it was funny. He had a different take on things. He's a very creative guy, very, sometimes just off the wall though. He'd just come out, I remember we were working on sounds on the pinball game, and he came down once, and he was like, yeah, we need to get psychiatric, psychoacoustic, human engineering, human input people, find out what sounds are pleasurable and not. We have to get all this research going, and and a lot of times he'd make suggestions that were just you realize this is never going to happen. we have to ship this thing in 2 days. And then you just kind of go, yeah, I remember I was just going yeah, really good idea, Nolan. Yeah, we'll think about that, and then he'd go upstairs and like that would be it. So
Yeah.
then you'd get back to your real work. but a great creative guy, amazing creative guy.
Yeah. I mean, you first started on pinball machines. That's right, isn't it? Before you moved into the games. Yeah.
That's that. Right. So had a chance to work with Steve Ritchie, who became a really big pinball designer over the years, and so we had some good good times there. The Atari games unfortunately had some technical issues, and they weren't too reliable. Sometimes they would kind of start smoking, and I think the power supplies weren't well engineered.
I mean, what was the first pinball machine you worked on? Do you remember, like, properly got involved in, or was it?
It was called the Atarians. And it was kind of a sci-fi theme, and actually it was kind of fun. I got to work with George Opperman, who was the artist at Atari, and he was the guy that designed the Atari logo, and
wow.
They had that whole kind of style, kind of this modernistic smooth kind of style for all their boxes. Remember that they all look kind of the same, and he was the guy behind that whole kind of Atari look of that era, and a great he did some great pinball glasses, amazing perspective, and amazing art creator.
Nice. I mean, did you enjoy working on the pinball machines, or were you always kind of sort of hankering to move on to the sort of more I don't know if is it adventurous or sort of more like the video game side of things?
Yeah, it's funny because in this era, I mean, I guess the big game was Breakout.
Yes.
And they hadn't really made the move to microprocessors. They were just starting that move to actually put a microprocessor into a video game. They were kind of in the last days of I guess what you call like hardware video games, where everything was hardwired logic, and you'd have a counter, a chip that would store your score, and that chip would score my score, and very just a very chip by chip design done in hardwired logic and stuff. And the games that you could do with that sort of tech were fairly superficial Pong kind of games, or Breakout was maybe one of the more sophisticated ones. So it was I always thought of video games was like, yeah, they're kind of cool, but it wasn't really anything, to me, like pinball was the shit, and the complexity and the richness of a pinball game was just so much more than Pong-like video games.
Fair enough. Do you think there are any skills? I mean, they're both gaming industries, but did you learn any sort of transferable skills from moving on pinball machines to actual video games?
Oh yeah, well, obviously I learned a lot about programming microprocessors, and it was funny. It was such a different world. I mean, it's hard to even imagine, but we actually didn't have terminals, and we actually didn't even type. They just assumed like men couldn't type, so you would write your code up on like a piece of graph paper or something, and then you'd submit it to the key punch girls, and then they would actually type your code into the computer and run it, and then you get like your errors and stuff, and you correct it. But you basically were working through a typist, because it was something like genetically men were incapable of typing, or it was they were too good for it. I don't know what it was, but it was bizarre. Wow. Partly I guess we were all sharing the same development computer, so I guess maybe that was part of it too. It's like we just had one girl that could type really fast, and she was like doing 10 different programs. 10 different programmers were submitting jobs to her, but that was just kind of a bizarre dark age of things, and learned a lot about games and programming, and especially audio, because kind of pinball was, there's a lot of dead time in a pinball game, just the ball's kind of rolling around, and it's very slow, and so you had to figure out, cool sounds and stuff to kind of fill the dead air, of the pinball game and the effects and everything. So I learned a hell of a lot about, programming digital synthesizers and how to make sounds and stuff. And that really was valuable in my later incarnation as a video game designer.
Of course. And obviously we'll talk about raw thrills later, but what do you think about maybe the slight death of pinball machines, or is there any chance, do you see it coming back at all ever, or?
Well, actually, it's interesting. It's been a very cyclical industry. So obviously the absolute peak of pinball was probably in that era, probably at about 79, and I think the industry was making, I think it was around 500,000 pinball games a year. So it was like every day 1,500 pinball machines were being built in Chicago typically. And so that was pretty amazing. That was kind of the golden age of pinball, was that late 70s, where pinball was still a lot more entertaining than the early video games.
Yeah.
And but of course, when the video boom really hit, and the great classic games, the Pac-Man, Defender, Asteroids, Donkey Kong, all those great games. That just kind of, the pinball industry went into a very steep decline, and but it kind of came back when the arcade video crashed, and pinball kind of came back, and there was a kind of a boom back in the 90s where I think the industry was making maybe 100,000 games a year, as opposed to 500,000, and then it kind of crashed again in around 2000, and then also 2009, and that. Now it's actually come back, and I think the industry is, I'd say maybe 20,000 games a year are being made in the industry. So it's like
it's not, it's still a number. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually, there's been quite a renaissance in the last 7 or 8 years.
Good.
And a big thing about it is now they've incorporated video displays in the pinball game. So now I think that's been a huge driver of kind of a renewed excitement in pinball. And there's just amazing playfield design, amazing device work. I think, a lot of this computer-aided design and stuff has really helped, open a lot of doors for much more creative pinball machines. So, it's surprisingly, pinball is not dead. It's still alive and kicking, but certainly
Good.
A shadow of its former self.
Well, yeah.
But it's got some very loyal following, and in the U.S. I know it's actually increasing quite a bit. And there's a worldwide players organization for pinball tournaments. It's called the IFPA International Tournament, and I think that every year there's around like 10 or 20,000 pinball tournaments taking place. So
nice.
It's an interesting, very kind of grassroots sort of incredible growth in in the pinball players, and they're very it's a very niche thing, but they're incredibly dedicated to their art.
That's really good. I'm glad it's still around 100%.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right, Defender. Was that the first time you really got involved? Was that your first video game? Or
exactly.
Was it? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of, as a player, I loved. Obviously, I loved some of the games in the late 70s. I loved. I think Space War. To me is maybe, if I was saying what is the greatest video game ever, I would say Space War, which was actually developed in 1962, I think, or 63, early 60s, and on computer mainframes at MIT, or at mini computers, I guess, the early mini computers, and but I think that game is just amazing, and I love that. It's kind of a 2-player deathmatch. It has gravity, it has, planets, explosions, and, it was a very interesting game for, this thing was, 10 years before Pong. That I think is a great game. And I love playing Asteroids, and Space Invaders, of course, was probably, the game that really got me wanting to design my own game. Just the feeling of that tension, the incredible rush you had if you could finish off a wave of invaders, and just the soundtrack I think was just. I don't know if people. I'm sure people died of a heart attack listening to that thing. And it was, it'd be like, just like fuck. I mean,
Oh,
it's just like so incredible. So that was just a great game. I think the game that really opened up the industry as far as what could be done with a real computerized video game.
Were you given like free reign to do whatever you wanted, Eugene? Were you like, you told me any game you want? Were you given like make a space game? How much sort of control do you have for it?
So yeah, no, I had pretty much, I could do whatever the hell I wanted to, which was so anyway, basically we Steve Ritchie and myself had left Atari and we went to Chicago to do more pinball games, and then it was at Chicago at Williams that I got the opportunity, and they knew nothing about video games, so they just said, well, I think I might have proposed like, hey, let's do a video game. They go, oh, sure, what the hell, I'm like, go for it, man.
Love it. I mean, how do you reflect on the success of the game? It is a huge seller.
When you're like the only guy, and even if you don't know shit about it, it's like they just throw you in the friggin' ocean and like, swim, dude. And
Wow.
So that was the crazy thing. So it was me and we had some hardware guys, and I was another programmer. I hired, I think the guy was Sam Dicker. Kid was like, I don't know, 17 or 18 or something. I don't even know if he graduated high school. I remember it was like, well, we're probably going to need another programmer on this project, and like this guy walks in and like, hey man, do you know how to program a computer? And he goes, yeah. Like, okay, you're hired. It's like
you couldn't make it up.
And so it was just crazy seat of the pants type of stuff that today would be maybe you'd be talking about why of course everything would have failed. That would be the post-mortem of the complete failure of the Defender project. We could be talking about all the the idiotic things we did, but
was that almost the success and failure of Atari summed up though? How much freedom you had and how little direction you had in a weird way.
I think so. There was really obviously you have to have the right people and the right time, but it was a very pioneering time, and I mean I was a big player of video games at the time, and so I just had that passion. I was my own audience, and I was like, yeah, what I want to do, like, okay, Space Invaders is cool, but you're stuck on this screen and you can only move sideways, and and I want to like fly all over the screen. I want to fly. I want to have multiple screens. I want to, have this world out there. It's like you have these visions that you get so tired of playing the limitations of the games of a certain era, and then you want to break through those barriers and and try new things. And luckily I had some technical expertise, and and I had some great team working with me on the game, and somehow, there's a lot of false starts on the project. I mean, I started out just making like really bad versions of Space Invaders. I remember the first thing a Defender was going to be, it was, and I love Space Invaders so much. I'd say, well, let's do Space Invaders, but you can shoot in 3 directions, instead of one, and so you had like 3 buttons, left 45, right 45, and straight up, play that for, it took me like 2 days to get it running, and played it for about 30 seconds. Like, okay,
wow.
This sucks. This sucks. All right, next game. It's like, and so it was kind of like, I mean, I had like the name, I like the idea of defending, and I felt, it was a great, if you're gonna blow the shit out of everything, you want to have some moral ground to stand on. So
yeah.
you're defending, so. So I had the kind of that feeling of, you're calling the game Defender, and so that was really all I had, and it was like, where do we go from here?
Amazing. I mean, really quickly, what do you think of Defender 2000, the Jeff Minter kind of tribute to your game? You played it?
Yeah, no, that is no, it's awesome, man. It's Jeff is always a crazy creative guy, and he kind of marches to his own drummer and everything,
Yep.
and that was I thought it was really incredible. Probably might have been a little tough for me, but
I'm not very good at it.
I don't know if it's if the my reflexes maybe aren't quite what they are, but but I thought it was a great take on it, and so I think that was cool. But it's like, I don't know, to me, and I did Stargate, which was another sequel to Defender, and had a million things in it too. But I don't know, for like these days, it's like I just want to play the good old Defender. It's kind of like Pac-Man, where it's like they've done a million sequels and this, that, of Pac-Man, but for some reason at the end of the day, you want to go back to the original, like a music cut, you hear the original version of say Let It Be, by the Beatles or something, and then and you can hear all kinds of versions, and but then like, oh, you know what, I really liked the way they did, I Want to Hold Your Hand, or something. It's like, and it's like, it's kind of like, it's about the time, it's about who you were, it was about, there's all these things associated, and I think games are a lot like music in that aspect, where it's, you have these memories and of the time and the place, and it all gets wrapped together, and maybe it's just an incredible time in your life. And then sometimes it can be disappointing, because you go back, 20, 30 years later and play that game again, and you're just going, oh my God, this thing is terrible. That's like, how could I thought that was cool?
Yeah.
It's like,
we've all been there. Oh, Eugene, no, brilliant. I've got to ask, actually, why did you leave Atari? Because obviously you built up a big name already. You built one of the best selling games of their sort of time at Atari. But why did you end up leaving and start in, I think it's called VidKids, is that right?
Right. No, but I did Defender. It was at Williams. I did Defender.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. Yeah. Of course.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. So anyway, it was, I just felt, it's funny, like the management, we had, just incredible success with Defender, and the factory, that's all they built for like an entire year was Defender. And I think they built 70,000 or something of them. And it was, and then they started like thinking, well, if we hire one hippie with a typewriter and we got Defender, let's hire 50 hippies with typewriters, and we'll get we'll have 50 great games, and it became kind of like this huge kind of bullpen of trying to turn this into like a game factory, and that I was more like the artisanal type guy, or I just wanted to be in a small place with a few people and just do something cool, and
nice.
And so that's so I didn't really fit in with the kind of the big company that they became, and so me and a buddy of mine, Larry DeMar, who was one of the great pinball coders of that era, we decided to go out and do our own thing.
Good. And was it Stargate the next game? Is that right?
Exactly. So we it was, I think it was it's funny, like Defender it was a grind to get that thing going, and so I think after I finally got it going, the crazy thing was I remember the last thing I ever did was I decided to bring, after 5 waves, I would give you a new set of men, and I was like, I realized, like, no, I don't think anyone will ever make it to wave 5 because it's so difficult. But if they ever did, I'll put the men back at every 5th wave, just on the outside chance that someone might ever get that good, and that turned out to be like, probably made the game, the game it was, just that little afterthought, it's amazing some of the little tweaks you make in a game later on turn out to be like pivotal features. And but anyway, so after finishing Defender, just kind of like took a vacation for a few months. I don't even think I told anybody where I was. and so finally came back and hang out with my buddy Larry, and we just said, fuck this, and I think we actually tried doing some 3D games and stuff.
Oh,
some
wow.
some early prototypes, and that didn't pan out too well. So it was like, fuck that. And so we decided to, go start our own thing. And I guess, this kind of upset the management at Williams there,
Yeah.
and so they called us up, and they were actually had this office in New York City, which was very bizarre. We're like the absolute, the chairman of the board, and they had just some really swank office in I think it was Park Avenue or something, and so they flew us out there, and went around in this limo. They took us. We got this limo from the airport,
Wow.
and we ended up taking it to Times Square, which was like just a bunch of porno theaters and like drug addicts and stuff. But they had the greatest arcade in town there. So we spent the first few hours, playing games at the arcade. I think we were late to the meeting, but we finally got the meeting, and they go, we need a game in like 3 months, man. It's like, because Defender will eventually end, and we have nothing else. And so we had 3 months to make the sequel to Defender, and so it was so Larry and I just said, okay, what the hell? So basically, they were kind of just paying us more money to do what we did before, and we were kind of independent too at the same time. So that was kind of a win-win for everybody.
That's
so that
brilliant.
was that was VidKids. So so we, it was when you make a game, you always have, you have to, at some point you just have to ship the code, and it's funny, this programmer friend of mine from the Stone Age has always said, software is never finished. It just, at some point it becomes useful, and I think that is so true about, anybody, anywhere, as they encounter all the very, very annoying bugs in commercial software, realizes that at some point it became useful, but it's certainly not finished. So when you're doing when we did Defender, a lot of compromises were made, and so it was kind of a chance for us to go back and hey, let's optimize all these routines, or we can get more frame rate and have twice the objects on the screen, and 3 times the bullets, and we kind of didn't realize that maybe the human being at some point couldn't deal with this shit, but so we really had a chance to, kind of do the Stargate, which was, kind of fix everything we wanted to fix in Defender and put in a lot of cool new stuff. And it really, a lot of people, a lot of players, actually are Stargate players, and they love it more than Defender. And there's those purists that love Defender more than Stargate.
I know it's not linked, but what's your views on the Stargate movie that came out a few years later?
Yeah, but I guess that was just a totally different thing, though, right?
Yeah, of course it was. But they stole your name.
Yeah, it was kind of a sci-fi. I remember watching. It was kind of interesting, pretty bizarre. Yeah.
Robotron. I mean, what a classic! Robotron 2084, to be exact. I mean, was 1984 an inspiration for that game? That's what I've got down here. Is that right?
Well, totally, yeah. Because I was just, it's weird. Like sometimes I get really philosophical, and you could see like computers are getting smarter and smarter and smarter, even in those days, which were pretty primitive. But you could see like memories are doubling and doubling and doubling. I remember the first pinball game, our soundboard had 512 bytes of memory, and we had I put 30 sounds in that. It was pretty amazing. Anyway, and then by the time Defender came along, we had 2 kilobytes in the sound program, and so the shit was doubling, and you could just see double. I mean, at some point, as stupid as they were, after enough doublings, it's going to be smarter than people, I mean, it's mathematics, and so, just processing that thought pattern, you realize like, hey, this is for real. I mean, there'd been a lot of sci-fi about the robots and everything, but here was like, this is now mathematics. This is going to happen. They're going to get smarter than us. And, and then you start thinking about that premise, and then you start thinking about, well, how is it going to go down? And it's like, well, we'll obviously start using robots or AI or whatever the hell it is, for more and more things, become more and more dependent upon them. At some point, they just realize humans are kind of nasty, messy people, and, they're building nuclear weapons, and, they're kind of dangerous, if you get right down to it. and it's, it's like, it's almost like, maybe we need to, prevent the world from being destroyed by their, whether it's nuclear or, global warming or whatever apocalypse is next. You really have to, change the, change the team, and, retire the humans and bring on the robots. And, obviously they're much more efficient. They could probably run on, a tenth of the energy. And, it just, you just realize like these human beings are very inefficient. Like, think about for space exploration. I mean, how pathetic, you have to send these guys around, and they weigh like, 300 pounds, and they're, they eat and they need air, and, all this shit, and they fart, and like, it's, this is ridiculous. Just get a friggin' chip, and stick it in orbit, like, we don't need all that crap. So, and then you get kind of dystopian on these things. And, so that was kind of the premise that, the robots, the human, we have that little tagline, the human, race is inefficient and therefore must be destroyed.
Yes.
And that's kind of the essence of it. It's like, is it efficient? Like, how efficient is your electric car? That's the final, at the end of the day, we're just judged on our efficiency, and the processing power, or how many watts per, unit of computing efficiency. So, that was kind of the basic, premise of the whole game. And it was like, how do you, and it was like, well, how can you make people care about this? I mean, it's kind of impersonal. It's kind of, abstract, like, okay, the computer's going to take who gives a shit? I'm just looking for my next bear, and so it was, trying to bringing in like your family in there, and, kind of make you care about something, kind of the same thing as in Defender, where you had the astronauts, where there's something, you just don't want to have a kill fest with nothing to care about, you want to have something that you're saving, something you're, and it's interesting, like you'll do something more, like you'll do more for somebody else than you'll do for your own self often, you'll risk your life to save someone else where, you wouldn't maybe do the same thing for yourself sometimes. So it's a very powerful psychology of helping others and saving others. And, so you just, kind of making, you have obviously the survival thing, all these things, trying to create an emotional experience that is very engaging to the player. And then on the kind of the play mechanic front, it's kind of a Space Invaders, but it's a Space Invaders is almost like one dimensional. The stuff is coming down on you. Yeah. You move in a line, they move in a line. It's a one dimensional game. It's like, what would be? How do we bring that into two dimensions? And then it was like, okay, well, you, instead of being at the bottom, you put the guy in the middle, and the shit comes from all sides simultaneously, and it's like, holy shit, I was sitting like, that's fucking scary. It's like, I mean, that's going to get your attention, like, and if you're going to die in like, 3 milliseconds if you don't know what the fuck you're doing, it's like, and so it was just like, it's like the ultimate pressure cooker, like, and it's kind of like in that era, some of the kind of the hardcore games of that era was just like, how do we, give the guy a heart attack? How do we get like the most adrenaline, the most tension, just overstimulate, overdrive, the brain to the point of it freaking explodes, and that was the idea of like the kind of the play mechanic of Robotron was, you're in the middle, everything's coming at you, just deal with it, man. And you got deal with it. And you have like 2 seconds to make a decision, or 2 milliseconds, and it just then obviously you need a super powerful. If you're gonna have that kind of shit coming at you, you have to have a super powerful weapon, and that's where the dual joystick came in, and it was kind of my frustrations with playing the game Berserk, which I love that, kind of robot game. And so that was the dual joystick was kind of my thing of like, how would I make Berserk a better game? Well, I didn't like, having to walk toward things you're trying to kill, and where, with a dual joystick, you can be walking away and killing them, and, walking in different directions and killing in different directions. And, it's much more efficient, If you're getting destroyed for being inefficient, you better start getting efficient. So
nice, brilliant. I agree. I wanted to ask actually, was this the first arcade machine to use dual stick controllers? I don't know if you know.
As a dual joystick, obviously there was Pac-Man, of course, was a joystick, and
dual one,
But it's actually, it's funny, when I was designing Defender. We ended up using a 2-way joystick for the up and down, and I originally I wanted to have a full joystick, but somehow I couldn't find a supplier for it. But as far as I know, it was the first one that uses a joystick, independent joysticks for moving and firing.
Amazing, that's absolutely incredible. Yeah. I mean, and I've got it here. Well, it's the Robotron game. The enemies are quite complex AI, actually. How did that go about? How did you try and, because that's what made the game stand out as well, I think. What was your ideas behind making the enemies like quite intelligent, really?
Yeah, it's funny, they were somewhat intelligent, and the amazing thing is like their brain is like, the program I think is like 50 or 60 bytes. I mean it's like, and they do some really interesting shit. But a lot of that was stuff I learned on Defender, and it was just how to fuck with the player, and how to basically psychologically just destroy you. And so like the projectiles in the game, there's different ways you can, so an enemy is firing a projectile at you. You could fire it right where the player is. I mean, that's the simplest thing. Just fire it at the player. And that's kind of interesting, but if you're on the move, then that becomes, maybe not so effective, and it's very predictable. And so then it was like, well, okay, let's have another different shot. That's what I would call a rel, like a rel bomb or something, a rel shot, where it's relative to the player. So it's basically you take the player's velocity and you add that to, the direction, basically you shoot at him, but add his velocity to the velocity of the projectile. So basically it's going to where you will be in like a second, and that really fucks you up.
Yeah.
And then there was another shot where, we had, the enforcers, for instance, shoot these kind of little spark balls at you. And their thing was like, well, let's add a random curve to the whole thing, So basically, a random acceleration is added to the thing. So it's like it's like a curveball, And it's like it can like spin toward you, and that just like is ridiculous. And then you mix them up, like the different enemies use different algorithms, and even the same enemy might be able to send 2 or 3 different types of shots at you. And so it really, and then you add obviously a little random say like a direct little randomness to the direction, so it kind of like goes, sometimes it's right at you, sometimes it's a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. And so even if you're dodging it or whatever, sometimes you walk right into it, dodging it because the thing was shot, 2 inches to the left of you in the beginning,
Yeah.
and or it's curving into you, so it's all these little very subtle things, it's very basic mathematics, but because you make all these things different and you have, it's almost like a stew, like a really nice soup is what I kind of thought. The game originally was just the grunts, which are the guys that just come at you, the base robots, and all they do is just seek you. I mean, it's completely blind, except they have an accelerating velocity that gets faster and faster, and that's just basic. But it's kind of like that's like the basic vanilla cake, and then you go, well, that's okay, but I'm getting tired of eating vanilla cake all the time. Okay, well, let's bring in say another enemy like the enforcers, which is the second enemy, and those, it's kind of interesting, a spawning through a spawning effect where you have these spheroid circles, and they really, they kind of go out and then they lay eggs for the enforcers, and then they grow up and come after you. And if you don't get, you want to kill the thing that's spawning first, because then otherwise it keeps making more of them,
Yeah.
And so you have this kind of the spawning effect, and that adds further chaos to it. And so, and then they kind of glide around. They move differently. They don't always seek you. They're kind of moving maybe in more of an offset of you and gliding around. And, then you throw in, so that's two enemies. You have the spark ball, which is they're shooting. I guess we have the electrodes that you just walk into and die. And then like, okay, let's have an enemy. This was kind of the Hulk, which was indestructible. And like you can't even kill him. You can kind of push him away a little bit. So you get a little bit of feedback. You kind of like he's coming to crush you, and you're kind of like holding him off, like you're just like hoping, like how like I had to get out of here quick, but there's nowhere to move, and he's coming right at me. I'm like and I think that's one of the beauties of the game, is that sense of confinement. Where you're stuck, as opposed to like Defender, where you have this huge universe, you're flying around, everything's cool. Robotron, you are stuck on this screen, and you're just like surrounded. You're always, shit's coming from all sides, and it's confinement, and it's like it's trapped. You're trapped, and you're trying to find a way out. And there's like it's flight or fight or flight. There's all these things. So then the Hulk is interesting. Just it fucks you up. It's like a moving wall, blocks your shots, and comes to crush you. And they kind of walk semi-randomly, but I think they're kind of maybe a little bit relative to you. And so you have those guys, and you throw in the brains, which come in the brain waves, and they have their cruise missiles and stuff, and which is kind of like a random, kind of a random walk of a projectile that is still kind of seeking you, sort of,
Yeah.
and just like it goes almost as fast as you're going, so you could kind of, it's amazing just the tweaking of the velocities when you're playing the game. You just tweak things so you can almost outrun them, but maybe not. Just you give the guy hope, and then you crush him. And like it's just like, but it's all in tweaking the velocities, how fast you move, how fast the enemies are moving, how fast the projectiles are, and all using kind of different algorithms. Of course, the brains are attacking your human family, reprogramming them, and so you have another goal, obviously, to rescue your human family, but to prevent the brains from reprogramming them into progs. And so you end up with all these, goals, conflicting goals. I want to stay alive. I want to kill this thing. I want to rescue this person. I want to do that. I got to kill the spheroid. Got to, before it responds more, I've got to, it's like, it's just this complete chaotic, many, you might have 10 or 15 goals that are operating in your brain at the same time, and while you're dodging shots, and so it's just a complete mental overload. And just that mix of all these things brewed together. And the last enemy was the tank, which was thrown in. It was actually my buddy Larry DeMar, his idea, and then the whole idea of that enemy was it was kind of like it had like computer tapes in it. If you looked at the graphics, very crude, but it had like a tape drive in it. It's like some kind of like 50s computer or something. Anyway, but the cool thing, I shot these balls, and like unlike any other projectile in the game, it would actually reflect off the boundary walls.
Nice.
And it just the kind of like pool, and billiards, and it's like, and you're like, and it just totally destroys your mind and your game, because you haven't seen anything like that, up until like wave 7 where it shows up, and it's like your whole game has to change based on these bouncing things coming off, reflecting off the walls, as opposed to most of the other projectiles just kind of slide down a wall, and these things reflect back at you. So all of a sudden it's a very dangerous world out there.
Love it, Robotron. What a classic. Smash TV is obviously, it's similar in a way, isn't it? It's quite a similar looking game, but pushed on a little bit further. We love it on Arcade Attack, by the way. We're a massive fan of Smash TV. Was the game inspired by The Running Man? I have to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was it was a couple of, there's a number of movies in the 80s there that were, I guess, great classics, like Terminator. Obviously, Running Man was a huge influence, and also the RoboCop, and some of the TV ads and stuff that was that inspiration. And so, but the whole thing, just you're in the future world, and you're killing people for toasters, and
it's brilliant. Oh, it's so good. Was The Running Man your favourite Arnie film? What have you got a particular favourite, Eugene, that you love?
Of my games?
No, of your Arnold Schwarzenegger films.
Oh, that's Schwarzenegger. I guess I would say the original. I guess my favorite of them all would be the original Terminator, and then T2. I think might have been that might have been his peak. Where I remember I'm not sure if it was the original Terminator or T2. Maybe, I guess I remember actually the original Terminator, where he's in the gun shop or something.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And the guy, and he goes, "I would like a 40-watt plasma rifle," and the guy, whatever. The guy goes, "Oh, okay, here it is," They start, pointing it at the guy and shit, and the clerk says, "You can't do that," and then you see his computer screen, and he's like picking out what to say. Screen, there's like "fuck you, asshole" or something. It's like I love just that early AI, thing. But to me, that was the original Terminator, and then T2 also was a great movie.
It's amazing. No, back to Smash TV. Such a great game. It's obviously Robotron. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like that was kind of the next step. Was there any other things like game mechanics that you were thinking about bringing into the game but never made it, or any crazy ideas when you're thinking of Smash TV?
Oh, Smash TV, we really, again, it was kind of like the Stargate to Robotron, And so we were like, I was working with Mark Tamel, who was a huge fan of Robotron, and he ended up doing the huge hit NBA Jam, which was just a massive game, but great, amazing talent. He's still active today. I think he's working at Zynga doing interesting things, but so we were just kind of like both huge fans of Robotron, and like, wow, what could we do? And originally in Robotron, the original game was I wanted to have all these different rooms, and going underground and do all these all these different themed areas and things, and it turned out that it was fun, and a lot less work not to have room. The game was fun enough, and it was like, oh, fuck rooms, man. Who cares? It's like, this thing is fun, But for the sequel, it's like, well, let's have the rooms, So we have all these themed rooms and stuff, and although they're all kind of square and look pretty similar, but there was kind of a map, and kind of this meta game, and so that was one of the things we wanted to do. We wanted to do the boss monster thing, because that was kind of a big thing starting in the late 80s there. Having bosses, and that was a big deal. And part of it was the gameplay style. In the early 80s, it was like, I want to play forever. If I'm great enough, I want to play forever. I want to, I want to play for 3 days, and put in one coin, It's like player's fantasy, And unfortunately, like the game operators was like, well, fuck that, man. It's like we got to get people paying, And so the concept of this buy-in game where you had to keep pay, you would, no matter what you did, like the boss monster would kill you and you have to pay more money. It was kind of like a paywall, in today's mobile, like free to play games, where you wave 38 and Candy Crush, you will fucking die, and we're gonna get some money out of you, and so we had to do had the same economic issues, and so there was a lot of and it was fun, and we had so much fun creating Mutoid Man and all the different boss monsters, and ending up with the MC himself was like the final boss, and so it was a lot of fun, just adding that in and kind of creating the buy-in mechanic, and then having all the pickups. In the original Robotron, there were no power-ups, so kind of bringing the power-up thing in, having super weapons, and all kinds of interesting stuff, which were very handy against the boss monsters, and and kind of having 2 players simultaneous, of course, which was huge, and it's so much more fun to have you and your buddy, it's like, I would love to go back in Robotron and maybe have 2 guys, have a version with 2 people, or have 10 people, it's like have 10 players, playing Robotron on like, can you imagine, get like about a 70-inch screen or something, and have a few thousand robots, descending on you, and you're playing with like 5 or 10 people.
I would play that.
But so it was cool to have the 2 players, and that was obviously it was fun, but it also was, again, kind of economics, where if you can milk 2 people for money at the same time, then all the merrier, so more efficient, you got to efficiently monetize.
I like it.
So that was but it was kind of fun back in that era, where we were really trying to monetize the shit out of things, and a lot of those same principles ended up like 20, 30 years later in the mobile games. And it's kind of interesting, even in there were actually some arcade games that actually had you could buy upgrades to like vehicles, and I remember the game Cyberball, which is a American football game. You actually could pay extra money to get a better quarterback and shit.
Wow.
This was, and stuff that, the early microtransactions, which, then became, $100 billion industry and today's mobile environment.
It's insane. We spoke off air slightly before we started an interview, Eugene, about John Tobias. We've had him on the show before, a proper legend, as you know well, and he spoke very highly about you. Like you were his sort of mentor at the time. Obviously he went on to make Mortal Kombat, but you said earlier he worked on Smash TV. Is that right? And can you give a little background?
Yeah, so that was his. I think we had just hired him. It was like we were Tamel and I were staffing up the team, and we interviewing people, and John was, I think, maybe one of the first guys we talked to, and as an artist, and he came actually from the comic book world, and he was a comic artist originally, and we just saw his sketches and his creativity and everything, and we just, wow, man, we need to get this guy on the team, and he was really, the heart and soul of all those incredible boss monsters, Mutoid
Mm.
Man, down to just the player characters. It was interesting. A lot of it was just 3D out of his mind. But I remember to get the original player characters and the low level grunts that like had the baseball bats and kind of beat the shit out of you. We actually, it was crazy. We wanted to get it more. Robotron was a classic, but it was this flat, weird, I don't know, pancake projection, and so we wanted to bring it into like a 2.5D situation where just much more realistic and actually very contemporary look, and to get the perspective right, we initially actually had guys up on step ladders filming characters and in costume and stuff, and like the guys with the baseball bats and stuff, and so we were able to key in a lot of the animations for the humans using real human models and digitizing computer digitizing color video, and obviously John had to completely clean up everything and kind of make it in his style, and but for the non-human characters, that was all from the mind of John and his incredible imagination, and it was kind of cool. With the boss monsters, we kind of developed we kind of got tired of the classic boss monster where you sit there and you just like you have to shoot him 4,000 times and then he like explodes or something. It's like and you have maybe there's a count on the screen, like, oh, you're at 3,874, and just kind of boring, and like so we wanted to have like something really fun for the player, so he has constant feedback of how he's damaging the boss, and we wanted to have like different levels of the boss, kind of like the nested Russian dolls kind of thing, and so you would you'd break through the mutate, blow him up once, and then he's like in his underwear and you shoot him again, and he's just like different levels of and it just in different weapons would come into play. The boss monster would change his weapon characteristics, his physical characteristics, and showing his damage and his injuries and stuff, and made it just really, you really felt very, very realistic feeling for the boss battles, and so John had to do all that stuff, all the different injury levels and all the different the different characters that were kind of nested within the boss monster. All of it made pixel by pixel. We had no art tools really. We just had a pixel drawing machine, and so he would pixel by pixel he did an incredible cast of characters and just beautiful style. Everything kind of holds to that style and looks really cool. The whole game kind of holds together, and that whole kind of photo studio Running Man kind of thing, and so it was just a really pleasure. Just this kid, I don't know, 19-year-old kid, comic book artist, and he really found his true forte was as a video game creator.
Well, good on you for giving him a chance. It sounds like didn't have much experience, but you took a punt and it worked out. So well done.
Yeah, it was funny. We had another weird story. We were hiring this programmers, and we hired this one kid. I think his name was Rob, and he was working on the program for a month or two, and like this guy's not making any progress, and and then so Tamel's working with them, and finally he realized the guy could not see.
Oh.
and so he took him down to an eye doctor and got him glasses, and then he could see the screen, and it worked a lot better after that. It's a crazy story, and it's another. We actually hired another artist. I think her name was Lynn Young, and she did a lot work with John and did a lot of the characters in the game also. And I remember she after we'd finished Smash TV, she had proposed that we do this new game, and it was going to be about growing plants and
Right.
like farming and growing plants and stuff, and we're like, oh my God,
Yeah.
this is never going to fly. I mean, this is like, people are going to fall asleep. This is a ridiculous concept. This is never going anywhere, and then 20, 30 years later, there's like Farmville.
I know. Harvest Moon.
The biggest game, Haiti, all this stuff, the biggest games ever, are these farming games, she was like 30 years ahead of her time. It's funny how, we were like the experts in the field, and, what the hell did we know?
I'd love to ask you, Gene, do you think there's any room for a new Smash TV game? I mean, I think it could be brought back personally. What do you reckon?
That would be, it would be cool to absolutely, man. To just go with that theme, go with the classic story there, and but just bring a new modern look on it, and I don't know, it would be pretty crazy. I don't know, maybe we could get 10 people playing this at once or something. I mean, it was like first person or something, and you're like, you're competing in this, death match, the death race, whatever it is, man. But I know it could be obviously it could be an incredible experience. Maybe there's 100 guys, maybe it's 100 guys on an island.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I'd play it, definitely. Eugene. Well, look, obviously you made a massive stamp. You made some huge games. Is it right you left midway to work on VR for a little bit?
Right. Well, this was actually I left them 3 or 4 different times, but I guess the second after Smash TV, I left. It was like in '91 or something, and I left to do basically pioneer a 3D texture mapping, which I thought was going to be the next thing, and then we ended up doing the game Cruising USA, and then Cruising World, and Cruising that again, and kind of the very early 3D texture mapping games, and kind of taking real footage, real world graphics, and creating it in 3D and driving around the world, and that was super fun project, and so that was pretty much most of the 90s was spent doing those cruising driving games, and but then I guess Midway kind of went bust there in the early 2000s, and so I was kind of out of work for a little bit, and so and at the time the arcade was really suffering. I mean, kind of like pinball. I mean, arcade video has not been just a joyride either. Ups and downs, and great crashes and stuff. And so really, I was kind of like, there wasn't really nobody to hire me. So me and a couple of buddies said, okay, well, we'll just start our own arcade game company. So if you can't get a job, go out and make your own.
Good on you.
And just somehow figure out how to eat. But yeah, and that's how Raw Thrills got started. The kind of my current job.
Good on you. Before we talk about Raw Thrills, Cruising USA was huge.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to sound rude, but I'm surprised how popular it was. I think it's really popular in the US, maybe not so much in Europe, but it was even more popular in like Daytona and other Sega races. I mean, why was it so successful? I'd love to hear what made it so special, really.
Yeah, and I mean the whole idea was, and I guess it was kind of I'd played a lot of the Sega like Virtua Racing and pre-cruising games, and then there was obviously the Atari classic hard driving. And Race Driver, which was the first really commercial 3D polygon game, but it wasn't texture map. It was just constant shaded polygons. And it was just very frustrating those early kind of 3D driving games, you'd have to, there'd be a corner like 200 yards down the road, and you'd have to turn like, a second before you got to the corner, or you'd go off the cliff. It's like it was just partly just the driving dynamics, and it was a very a lot of lag in the processing of the polygons, and there's a lot of times you have 2 or 3 frame buffers and all kinds of crap going on that makes things very laggy and very pro. You have to be really a pro to play those things, and so it was like I wanted to make a game. I felt like I want to do a driving game where like if you turn left, it actually goes left, and if you turn right, you go right. You don't skid in the wall. You don't flip over. You actually, just like driving down the road, you turn left, you do go left. It's like, is it really that hard? And so that was Cruising was like, hey, and it was trying to get a really snappy control on the feedback, really work through all the lags and have a very responsive game. Kind of just like the Defender, actually, we got it down to like 8 milliseconds between you hitting a fire button and seeing your shot on the screen, And it was kind of like a tradition of mine is like, let's really be responsive to the player and make the game easier, more, by giving you what you have in real life. I mean, you turn the steering wheel to the right, it turns right. It doesn't, you don't wait a half a second, then it goes, So that was, kind of a driving thing that anybody could have fun, anybody could enjoy. And that was kind of kind of a game for all the rest of the people, not for the top 10% of the players.
Right. Yeah.
And so that was the whole idea of Cruising, and kind of more forgiving, more, when you head on with something, you send them flying into orbit, and you keep going, it's like, oh shit, or you just, you fly up in the air and you always miraculously land, like, wow, that was cool, like instead of having like, a 20-second crash scene where you see, your driver burning up or something, you just miraculously, cartwheel through the air and boom, you're back in the game, and so that was kind of the whole theme there about Cruising was, and just kind of taking the real world out there, rather than having some kind of fantasy. Again, just take the real world imagery and it's like virtual tourism, and who doesn't want to drive through the Grand Canyon or Paris or Tokyo or whatever.
I want to play it now. I'm going to play it. Right, Raw Thrills. I mean, you started your own company, Raw Thrills, and you even mentioned a bit earlier that the arcade industry was, going through a bad patch. I mean, that took guts to start that company up, but fair play. I mean, how do you reflect on the early days? Was it quite tough at the start, and how do you reflect?
So actually, it's so yeah, it was kind of a rough time, and we had a few guys in a very small shop, and I guess originally we were going to go and the idea was we were going to go and just we like, well, the arcade's dead, so let's make like a home game or something, and like a console game. And so that actually was, as pure as we were like, fuck, we got to make money, and so and we're like, well, but it could be an arcade game too if there's any arcade labs. And so we spent a couple of years and just couldn't, we were trying to be all things to all people, and like, well, it'll be an arcade game, it'll be a home game, it'll be this, it'll be that, no, maybe it'll be mobile, I was like, and finally after a couple of years we realized, let's just make a fucking arcade game, it's like, partly, it's amazing when you're down to your last couple grand, your mind gets amazingly focused,
Yeah.
You get amazingly fucking focused when you're down to your last couple bucks.
What was the first arcade game you made then?
The first game for Raw Thrills was a game called Target Terror, which it's funny, we were working on a driving game actually initially, and again we were kind of running out of money, and then the whole like 9/11 thing came around,
All right.
And so it was like, we thought, oh, this would be a cool, and everybody's getting like so freaked out about the terrorists and this shit and that shit and the whole 9/11 thing. And, it was so crazy. And the whole, I remember like there was like mayors of small towns like, we need to have the military needs to come in here protect me, and because the terrorists are going to kill me, and it was all this paranoia, just incredible, panic and paranoia about terrorism, and we're just thinking, okay, let's kind of go with this craziness and just hype it up, 10 decibels or 100 decibels, and you have like let's have them, the terrorists are coming, they're going to blow up the Golden Gate Bridge, they're going to go to Times Square, they're going to, they're in the nuclear reactors, they're in the air, they're into the airports and shit. We just tried to think of the craziest scenarios, and just let the bullets fly and the glass break and let the blood flow, and and so it was like kind of just a full-on shooter, kind of in the tradition of like some of the classic Atari shooters of Area 51 and Max Force, and maybe some of the old Terminator games and stuff. It was the idea was to take real world backgrounds and take digitized footage of the actors. So all the players and the villains and everybody were real people acting, with full motion video placed into this huge 3D world. And it's amazingly realistic feeling. And so we could just do crazy stuff, and you get all the emotion of a real actor. I think even today, with all the 3D motion capture and everything, there's still like this veneer of synthetic kind of phoniness, and kind of machine kind of feeling automatons. They're not really humans. They're kind of really good automatons. And so that was the the cool thing about Target Terror is that we really captured all that beautiful acting and emotion of a real human, and could, and we didn't have to program all that shit and everything. You just threw a guy in front of a camera and started, die and make it really cool, man. And then you're just tapping all that great human emotion, acting, and everything. It was really cool.
Oh, I mean, Eugene, you know better than me, obviously, but your company has been very successful, and I don't want to sound rude, but almost against the odds, because I've seen a lot of arcades around where I sort of live just close. Why do you think you've been successful? What was your magic ingredients for Raw Thrills?
I think partly we're really into like a really quality experience. Partly, we're just super experienced guys. We have I've been in this business for over 40 years, and we have many other guys that have been, 20 or 30 years. And also we have some really talented, just young guys who are, just like me. They're just like, hey, can you program? Sure, man. It's like and, young artists and stuff. So you kind of have the mix of the old guys and the new guys, but you kind of have to, the arcade spirit is the key, where you have to you want to have something super accessible, something that's really fun for everybody, and it's not an expert experience. It's just it's a fun experience for everyone. And like in the racing games, you're really thinking about the human emotional factors, and, you really have to put a good rubber band in the game to keep people close, because there's such different skill levels. And, if you ever work a driving game, program a driving game, if there's no rubber band to keep the race close, the good player just goes out and you never see him again. It's no fun. And so you really have to, it's beyond just making a great simulation and a realistic thing. It's you need to look at all the human factors of how to give someone a really fun experience, and how to take people maybe with different levels of skill, put them together, and they can still have a good time, and with instant instantly get into the game, understand the game, and do it, without having to, pay your dues and go to Fortnite school or something and learn how to play the game. You just get out there and do it in 20 or 30 seconds. So that's kind of like the arcade spirit of just get out there, very high emotional content, great action, and something that everybody can identify with, and just have a great time, and really working all those, all that behind the scenes stuff that makes for a great experience, that makes it seem super simple and fun, but really there's a lot of interesting stuff behind the scenes making all that happen.
Love it. I mean, I've played some of your arcades, actually. We've got a local cinema, and they got like a kind of arcade attached to it, and it's one of the only few around, to be honest, in Croydon where I live. And I've played your Jurassic Park arcade game. It's absolutely incredible. I've also played Space Invaders Frenzy. I mean, you've got some big names as well. You've got some big Alien games, Halo games, some big IPs. But I have to say, I do enjoy your games a lot. I mean, how did you secure such sort of big names and stuff? Is that quite a big job or a tough job? Or
Yeah, it is. It just really years and years of work. The first big license we got was Fast and Furious back in the early 2000s, and that was every now and then something like lands in your lap, where you're looking for a license for a game or something, and I remember a buddy of mine, my buddy Joe, called me up and go, "Hey, you're doing a driving game. I can get you Fast and Furious." I'm like, what? Nice. It's like, and it was crazy because I was like working on this driving game it was called Hot Cars at the time. I was like, Hot Cars, man, that's cool, Yeah. And I don't, people go, "Well, what are you doing, at Raw Thrill?" It's like, "What the fuck are you doing over there?" Like, "Oh, we're making this really cool like street racing game." It's like, it's called Hot Cars, and they go, "Really? Is that like Fast and Furious?" And it's like, and then my buddy calls me up and says, "Hey, I can get you Fast and Furious." I'm like, "Hell yeah!"
Yeah, you'd be silly not to.
And so, but it was like, so sometimes it's just like a stroke of fortune, but then you kind of you get your track record together, and you do some great work, great quality, and then every now and then they'll come to you, and I remember actually Jurassic Park was one of those really fortunate events where we had kind of we were just looking for a new project, and an agent representing Universal, licensing agent, called us up and said wanted to come by and pitch some of their titles, and a lot of times they're kind of pitching their back catalog, and some of the stuff maybe maybe seen at better times, but you listen to them and maybe there's some gems there, and this was in I think 2011, before there was any talk of a sequel to Jurassic Park or anything, and he said, "Yeah, how about Jurassic Park?" and we're like, wasn't that like 20 years ago? It's like
yeah.
And then, but the more we thought about it, we go, wow, that's such an evergreen classic, and like kids really love dinosaurs. It's a never-ending fascination with dinosaurs, and it was just such a classic game and such a great title. And actually, Sega did an original Jurassic Park game that was very successful, and but it had been like 20 years, and technology had gone unbelievable, and we just go, wow, we could just really go back and make a really incredible Jurassic Park rail shooter game, and so that was kind of the emphasis of that. So it's a lot of times you're just being open. I find like a big part of being a game designer and being in the industry, it's like you realize like you're not the font of infinite wisdom. It's like you have to keep your eyes and ears open all the time and listen to your players. And when they tell you your game sucks, if one guy tells you your game sucks, maybe he's wrong. When like the 10th guy tells you your game sucks, your game sucks.
Yeah.
And and so you got to be open and like, hey, what's an idea? What's a great idea? Tell me a great idea for this game. And actually, Space Invaders. I mentioned Space Invaders. That was So I love that IP. I love the license. I love the game. And I actually came up with this idea like, hey, let's make, because like the arcade is all about big today, where the things are bigger and bigger and bigger. Like, our Halo game is like fucking, 3 stories high. And, it's just like a spaceship landed in the arcade. Anyway, so we're like, I'm going like, well, how do I, Space Invaders? I love Space Invaders. Like, how can we make it cool? Like, and I'm thinking like these big LED billboard things. I'm going, holy shit, yeah, we'll get like a billboard screen, and make the thing 10 feet high, like, and people are gonna love it, It's like we'll have a 10-foot high Space Invaders, and it's like with the bright LEDs, and so we mocked one up, and it was just so fucking cool because the bright, you don't realize like standard TVs really aren't that bright, and the viewing angle is really kind of limited, and you put a full blown, one RGB LED for every pixel on Space Invaders, and you crank that thing up, and it's just like, wow! It's like you just brain, I think, we're kind of, I know like crows like shiny objects, and I think human beings like shiny objects too, and like, and you turn those LEDs up, you're just like, like you're a zombie, man. You can't stop looking at it, and so. So we're working with it, and like, how do we do Space Invaders? So we, start out with the classic game, and I mean, a great game, a wonderful game, but we're kind of in the modern arcade. Things have kind of sped up, and people want shit to happen like in 2 minutes, and they want really more action. As incredible as Space Invaders was in the 70s, today people are just, it's just like you watch a commercial from the 1960s, and it's just like. They had like minute-long commercials, and it's like it's just like it took forever. Like, tell me the name of the product. What the fuck? Like I've been watching this commercial for 40 seconds. I should have heard the product name 20 times by now. Like, what the hell is this? And so it's like the same thing where like a 20-year-old, 30-year-old, basically a 40-year-old game, the pace of action is really, not as just not as challenging as it was in that era. And so we go, man, we have to like, how do we, crank this thing up? How do we get the action flowing here? And actually my partner at Raw Thrills here, Andy Eloff, I don't know, he had a bad dream or something, or a nightmare, but he was playing down there one day, and it was next to our Jurassic Park game. And, we had some really bad versions of Space Invaders that we were doing, and it was just like so frustrating. And then, I guess he looks over at the Jurassic Park controller, which is kind of like a machine gun, and just like, dude, like, let's put that on Space Invaders, like, yeah. And so we put those Jurassic Park guns on Space Invaders, and it was like a, revelation. It was just like, oh my God, this is incredibly fun, It's just like, it was instantly maybe one of the most fun games ever, Yeah. And just that one thing. And then, of course, we had to make the invaders tougher, because you're machine gunning them. So then it was like, okay, we'll have multiple grids of Space Invaders coming down on you at the same time, like, and then we'll have like these red ones that are just incredibly vicious coming down. And it's just like, and it becomes like this super intense, it's kind of like Robotron Space Invaders, And it was just, all of a sudden that game was just like so much fun. And I guess that was I think there's only been a couple times in my life where a game was fun in like 10 seconds. And one time was when I first put Robotron up on the screen. And it was just like, oh my God, this is just so fun, blowing these guys up, and they're all coming at me. And like, I remember the first day I was like, I'll try 10 of them. And then I, said, okay, let's do 20. And then it was like, let's do 100, like, and there's like these 100 guys converging, and we go, fuck, this is a great game, and that Space Invaders had that same feeling, when we put those Jurassic Park guns on Space Invader, and just like, because that's what you want when you play Space Invaders. You don't want to be a pea shooter. You want a real weapon, an automatic weapon, to deal with these guys, And
Great.
It was just like, what does the player really want? What's the player's fantasy, Give the player what his fantasy is, And so that was kind of the whole Space Invaders thing, which is really a fun game. And they have those in Tokyo at the Taito headquarters, and It's pretty fun.
Yeah.
But so, and we did the giant Pac-Man too, which was another kind of fun game in that format.
My 8-year-old son, who hasn't really heard of Space Invaders before, he loved it. The Space Invaders game, I thought it was brilliant, by the way. Just a nice take on the classic. Eugene, I've got a really tough question now. Out of all the games you've worked on, which one are you most proud of? Because you worked on some real classics. It's a tough question, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I really have to say Robotron. I really have to say Robotron because there was just some magic there, and getting those. I remember making that early prototype. I think it was starting with a Stargate cabinet, and I took a couple of Atari 2600 controllers, joysticks, and screwed them onto a piece of plywood, and then wired them up and put them in there, and just that first day, it might have been the third day I was working on the game. And I got the grunts on the screen, and I put you in the middle, and I got the firing going, and I'm just like, holy shit, this is magic. This is fucking magic. And so then I spent the rest of the 6 months just, putting all the cool characters and just all the fluff and the, added just the rich veneer of the game, threw that in there. But it's like I had the broth. I had like the best fucking chicken broth ever, And I just, I knew I could have sold that, but I knew, but I threw some vegetables in there and some chunks of meat and this, that, and the other. And, this is going to be a great, great game. Good
answer. Can you reveal any exciting projects or arcades you're working on, or is it all pretty hush hush at the moment?
We're working on, kind of exciting. We decided to get a little involved in the VR thing. And, I guess I think something I've always been fascinated with, and it's amazing. I've done research on VR, and it was actually originally demonstrated in like 1968.
Wow.
And so it's been around forever, and it always kind of gets overhyped, and then I remember in the early 90s there was kind of a big VR craze.
Yep.
And there was some early VR games out, and this one, Virtuality. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yes.
And it was pretty amazing, but you play it it was pretty pixelated and laggy and stuff, and it was incredible to be in this totally synthetic world, but it was just so laggy, and and just the thing, after a couple of minutes, you just have a splitting headache, and you're ready to barf.
Yeah.
And and it's like, and it's like, and you get off of it, and people would go, you're like turning blue, and people would go like, well, how was it? And you go, oh, that was fucking amazing. You try it. It's like, that's like, and then, but you'd never go back,
Yeah.
But I think finally, the technology is really, after endless hype and endless, imperfect implementations, we are getting with the resolution and stuff. We're on the verge of some really great VR experiences that is really going to add, this whole new dimension into video gaming. And so we're working on a new title there. Actually, it's going to be coming out hopefully in a few months if we ever get over this the virus thing here.
Yep.
And it's called it's going to be a King Kong game.
Wow.
It's called King Kong of Skull Island.
That does sound exciting.
And it's just an incredible experience for VR. So we had just an amazing team doing that. So, and it's a motion game also. So we have motion and both motion and VR at the same time.
I'm excited.
So that's that. We're working on that, and we're doing a lot. Some new drivers, and I guess we just came out with a really, really fantastic motorcycle game called Superbikes 3, which is just getting out there, and it's just a phenomenal, motorcycle simulator that we're very proud of. And so, and we're working on some other stuff too. But it's always fun. It's always there's always a new challenge. I mean, it's weird. Like, you're in a business where your product line goes obsolete every couple of years.
Yeah.
and in some ways you go, man, that really sucks. It's like, I mean, that's like, who would want to work in a business like that? I would have, I'm going to sell this joystick for 40 years. It's the best joystick ever. But so it does suck, because you're always like, what the fuck are we, how am I going to pay people next week? But the cool thing about it is that you have to keep reinventing yourself and coming up with new ideas, and everything's new every couple of years. So you never get, not making the same, shock absorber for your entire career. You're constantly, you're forced to make cool new things all the time.
Good on you.
It's super, it keeps you going.
Keeps you on your toes.
Yeah. So it's crazy. And there's some great new kids coming along that, it's so fun to work with, and, now instead of, at one point I was the young, ingenue, boy genius, and now I'm, getting on a little bit, and it's great working with like some of the new talent out there. It's amazing, great young kids coming into the industry. So
good stuff.
That's very, very thrilling for me.
Actually, I've always wanted to know, Eugene, with arcades, obviously they've got a relatively short shelf life. What do you do with the old arcades? Are they refurbished or thrown away, or?
The old games. Well, my games, of course, they always keep those.
Of course. Of course.
They never wear out, man. They never. I mean, they kind of have they go from, the A location to the B location to the C location. Sometimes they'll end up, in other countries, and and then eventually they end up in somebody's basement, or I guess in a dumpster. It's like,
fair enough. But not raw thrills. Never raw thrills.
No, of course, no. These are priceless. These are, they are, masterpieces. You couldn't throw one of those in a dumpster.
I've got two or three really quick fire last minute questions, Eugene. But I know you're a busy man. It's been a brilliant, really fascinating interview. I think this is a tough question, actually, because we worked on quite devilish games, actually. So if you could step inside any of the games you've worked on and live there for a day, which game would you choose?
That's a tough call. Well, definitely not the driving games, because I get run over. So I would, I maybe, that's interesting. I'd probably maybe some of the most interesting world would be either Smash TV or the game Narc. I don't know if you remember the game Narc.
I know Narc, yeah.
And where you were kind of in the back in the drug wars, and that whole all the interesting cast of characters there in the Narc world. So probably something like that. More. Something with a more interesting story and complex world, to hang out in and meet some of the interesting shady characters.
There would be some shady characters, that's for sure. Right, penultimate question. Did you ever start work on any games that were never released? And maybe looking back, you quite sad about that. Is there any games you think actually could have been quite successful but were never released for any reason?
There's I have file cabinets full of those. It's like, it's that's the one frustration of working as a game designer in the game business, is that ideas are cheap. You can, me and you we had a couple of pints and got a notebook out. We could probably, create 20 or 30 pretty interesting game concepts, at least for that evening. Maybe the next day they may not stand the test of time, but there's just like an infinity of ideas, and there's so many cool things that you could do in the genre, and so it's always so frustrating, because you're working on a game, and it takes maybe often it's multiple years to really craft a game. I think Jurassic Park, I think we spent like 4 years on the game, and so it's like your imagination runs so much quicker than the reality of actually implementing and crafting a game. And so there's just Yeah, a lot of concepts. I remember one thing I've always wanted to do and never been able to do it is kind of a firefighting game, where you're like in a building that's burning down, and you're, fighting the fire with the, you have the fire hose and you're, trying to, duck down and not breathe the smoke and trying to work your way up through the fire to rescue someone. And, just feel that, kind of in first person, and
that sounds amazing,
and that would be a really cool game, that, haven't been able to get, you need probably, 100 lifetimes to do all the cool games out there, man. It's I always loved, I remember one time I wanted to make the, like a sailboat, virtual sailboat racing game. And,
wow.
And have, water come splashing up in your face.
Oh, that would be amazing.
I guess you'd have to have like buckets of water coming on you at the right. You make the wrong turn, you capsize. There's a bucket of water comes down on you from. I guess you'd have to have some sort of waterproof area that you would. Kind of a wet zone. But yeah, I mean, it just try to really. The cool thing about the arcade, is trying to work with more and more your senses. Not only the your sight, your hearing, your vibration, your maybe squirting water on you, doing try to involve you every part of your body in the game.
I think. Yeah, that's how you got to stay above the consoles and stuff, innit? Something a little bit different. Fair play to you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly trying to, you're really getting in the, rather than, I mean, that's the beauty of the arcade is that you have a blank slate. You don't, it's not like, okay, here's your controller, here you go, you're sitting on your couch. With the arcade, it's like, yeah, I can sit you in a booth with 20 speakers directed at you, and I can kind of control the lighting, and I can give you a special, like we did this Walking Dead game, and you have like this special crossbow controller, and you're shooting zombies with a crossbow, and you have to pull back the string and shoot the zombies with your bow and arrow, and you can really involve a lot, more physical rather than just being just a simulation of a simulation.
Eugene, you've been a real gentleman today. I've absolutely generally found this interview so interesting. I know our listeners are going to love it, so I really appreciate your time. I've got one final question, bit of one silly question, but if you could share a few drinks with any video game character, who would you choose and why?
That is that's a tough one, but I guess you'd have to. I don't know. I'm thinking like the iconic. You'd have to go with Mario and the plumber.
Oh yes.
You'd have to dude, what's up, man? Like, where's your $100 million house, man? Let's go have some fun, man.
He's seen some things, yeah.
You probably have he's probably collecting, gold-plated, adjustable wrenches and shit, and in his pad, and but that was a great. I guess from a. I guess the other thing, maybe this dates me, was from back in the day. I remember like Laura Croft was the sex symbol of the original femme fatale of video gamers, and I think they even did a movie, didn't they?
Yes, I mean there's been a few Tomb Raider films.
Yeah, the Tomb Raider thing, and so there's always that. I remember when that came out, and I remember this friend of mine, he would play it, and all he did was just make her like fall off a cliff and watch the fall and the kind of the ragdoll effect. It was just there was so much. It was just incredibly interesting, just killing her off, multiple hundreds of times in a row, and just watching the body roll around and scream and stuff. And it was just strange. It's weird how when you get in these sandbox games, people they'll do some really weird stuff.
Yep.
I guess obviously the a lot of the crime games, and ours, obviously interesting, infinitely interesting too. Grand Theft Auto, just being in that world, would be kind of interesting.
Oh yeah, 100%. Oh, Eugene, look, really appreciate the chat today. It's been such an honor. Some brilliant and really funny stories. So thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thank you, Adrian, and good luck with your journalism and podcasting and everything, man. It's such a pleasure talking with you. You're kind of a legend in your own mind. No,
yeah, basically.
No, but it's such a pleasure. What I could talk to you for a few days, and we still have weeks more to say.